this video I'm going to show you how to join a continuous border of little granny squares around a large granny square blanket. To show you how I'm going to do this, I've made a larger sample granny square and then I've got some little sample mini granny squares as well. There's a little bit of maths involved in this if you're wanting to create a mini granny square border around your large granny square blanket, but it's very simple. If you're wanting to add mini granny squares, which are 3 rounds each, then your larger granny square needs to have rounds that are a multiple of 3. So I've made a larger granny square here, which has 6 rounds, which obviously is a multiple of 3. And then my little granny squares will all fit equally around the edge of that larger granny square. So if you were wanting to add granny squares, mini granny squares that had a 4 rounds each, then you would need to make a larger granny square. Your larger central granny square would need to have rounds with a multiple of 4. And then once again, your mini grannies will fit equally around the edge of your larger granny square. As you can see, at the moment, my mini granny squares just have 2 rounds. Now, if you're not familiar with join as you go, the joining happens as you create the final round of the square, so they will become 3 round squares throughout the process of joining them. The beauty of a continuous join as you go method is that there's no fastening off your yarn after joining each square. We will be joining all 12 squares around the edge of the larger granny square without cutting the yarn. So that way there's less ends to sew in. It makes the joining process, I think, a lot more enjoyable. So let's begin, and I'm going to start just by making a slip knot and popping it onto my hook. And grab one of my mini grannies, and I'm going to join with a double crochet, 2 chains into any of the corners, and then I'm going to work another 3 treble crochets into that same corner space. I'm just going to move along now to the next gap and work just in usual granny square fashion, another 3 trebles into that little gap there. And this is going to bring us to the corner. And this is the point where we start to join. So first of all, work the first half of your corner, so 3 treble crochets into that corner space. And we're going to join the mini granny square now to our larger granny square at the corner with a slip stitch. So put your squares wrong sides together, and then if you put your hook into the corner space of the large granny square from the back to the front, and then just slip stitch through. And then complete the corner on the mini square by working 3 trebles into that same space. And that's your first joining point done. So I'll take my hook out so you can see. So we've joined the mini granny square and the large granny square at the corner there. So we're just going to continue along now. We've got our next joining point. So the next joining point is the next gap on the large granny square. So we're just going to pop the hook in from the back to the front, pull a slip stitch through, and then work 3 treble crochets into the next gap along the mini granny square. And that's our next joining point on the large granny square. So hook in from the back to the front, slip stitch through, brings us to the corner of the mini granny square. So work your 3 trebles for the first half of the corner. And then once again, joining point on the large granny square. So hook in from back to front, pull a slip stitch through, and we need to complete the corner on the mini granny square. So 3 treble crochets into the corner space. don't be tempted to put in any extra chains at those joining points. If you add extra chains in the corners of the joining points, what you might find is that your mini granny square border might not lay flat. It might start to ruffle a little bit. So do avoid the temptation to put extra chains in. So I'll just take my hook out and show you where we've joined. So we've now joined our mini granny square to our large granny square. And we're just going to continue along the side now of our mini granny square. So 3 treble crochets into the next space. And we're now at the next corner of our mini granny square, and we're only going to work half of the corner. So just the first 3 trebles here. We're not going to work the whole corner. All will become clear as we work around our square. So that's what your little granny square and your large granny square should look like at this point. So I'm going to add the next mini granny square now. So I'm going to put my mini granny squares with wrong sides together. And we're going to be joining them along this edge here first. So first of all, work 3 treble crochets into the corner of the mini granny square that we're adding. And that brings us to the first joining point. So the first gap on the previous granny square, hook in from back to front and slip stitch through. And that's your first join done. Oh, I can't get it through. Let's try again. Right, try again. There we go. And then move along to the next gap and put 3 more treble crochets in there. And then we need to join. So hook in from back to front into the next space on the previous mini granny, slip stitch through, and that brings us to our corner. So work the first half of our corner, so 3 treble crochets. And we need to do 2 slip stitch joins here. We need to join onto the previous mini granny here and also the large granny square. So locate the corner space on your previous mini granny, pop your hook in back to front and pull a slip stitch through, and then we're going to join in this gap here, so the same gap that the previous mini granny was joined. Pop your hook into there, back to front and slip stitch through. Just do that again. I've lost my hook. And then complete the corner on the mini granny square that we're adding by working 3 treble crochets into the corner space. So we're going to locate the next joining point, which is the gap, next gap along on the large granny square. Put your hook in back to front, slip stitch through, and then work 3 treble crochets into the next space along on the mini granny square. So the next joining point, once again, hook into the next gap, back to front, pull a slip stitch through, and then we're at the corner of our mini granny. So work the first half of the corner, which is 3 treble crochets. And now we need to join to our large granny square. Once again, put your hook in, back to front, pull a slip stitch through, and then complete the corner on your mini granny, so the 3 treble crochets into that same space. So move along the side of our mini granny square now, because we've joined the 2 mini grannies to the large granny, and work 3 treble crochets into the next space. and then we're at the corner, and we're just once again going to work half the corner, so just the first 3 treble crochets here. So I'll just show you how it looks now. So we've joined our first 3 mini granny squares to our large granny square, and you'll notice that we've got an unworked edge along here, and that will all become clear as we keep adding the mini grannies around. Once we've finished, we will have an unworked edge all the way around our border, and we will work that last. All will become clear, I promise. Right, so let's add the next mini granny square. So once again, we're going to put our mini granny squares with wrong sides together, and we're going to work along this edge here. So first of all, 3 trebles into the corner of your next mini granny. And then we're going to join with the slip stitch to the previous mini granny, move along and work 3 treble crochets into the gap on our 3rd mini granny. Reached our next joining point, so slip stitch join into the next gap on the previous mini granny. And now we're at the corner, so we're going to work first half of the corner, so 3 trebles. And we need to join once again to the previous mini granny and the large granny square. So pop your hook in back to front into that corner space on the previous mini granny and slip stitch through. And same again on the corner of the large granny square, hook in, slip stitch through. Now, as this is our corner mini granny, we've actually done the joining part here, and we just need to complete the corner with 3 treble crochets. And continue just to work along this side. So 3 treble crochets into the next space. And we're at the corner now, and we're just going to once again work half the corner here. I'll take my hook out to show you. So that's our corner mini granny joined, and once again we've got an unworked edge along here. So the next job is to join the next mini granny here, and it's the same process as before. So we'll be joining along this edge here and this edge here. So I'll show you how we do that one once again. So we're going to put our mini granny squares wrong sides together and start by making 3 treble crochets into the corner. We'll start to join along the edges here of our mini grannies. So slip stitch join, continue working your 3 treble crochets into the next gap. And then slip stitch join again. And now we've got to the corner of our mini granny. So work 3 treble crochets. And we need to do 2 slip stitch joins again, one onto the previous mini granny and one onto the large granny square. So locate your corner space, pop your hook in, slip stitch through, and then locate the space on the large granny square, the corner space, and slip stitch through. Complete the corner on the mini granny, so 3 trebles into the corner space. Slip stitch join onto the large granny square, 3 trebles into the next space on the mini granny square, slip stitch join to the large granny square. At the corner we're working 3 trebles into that corner space on the mini granny, and we're going to slip stitch join once again to the next space on the large granny. I'll open that out so you can see. So we've now joined along this edge and this edge, and we just need to work along this side here of our granny square, our mini granny. So complete the corner by working the 3 treble crochets. Move along to the next space along this side and work another 3 treble crochets. And then in the corner we're just going to work the first half of the corner, so just those 3 treble crochets in that corner. There we are. So we've now joined 4 mini grannies, and we've joined a corner one there as well. So the rest of the granny squares are just added in exactly the same way all around the edge of your large granny square. So I'm going to do that now, and then once I get to the last granny square, last mini granny square, I'll meet up with you again. So I've now added all but one of my mini granny squares around the edge of my larger granny square. So we've just got this last one to add now. So we'll just be joining along this edge here and this edge here in exactly the same way as we did before. So I'm just going to pop those mini grannies wrong sides together and work those 3 trebles into the first corner. Start the joining. So in the first gap, slip stitch join, and then work 3 trebles into the next space. The next joining point, and then the corner, which is 3 trebles. And then slip stitch join to the previous mini granny first of all, and then to the corner of the large granny square, and then also to the first mini granny square, so in the corner of that one as well. So we've got 3 slip stitch joining points there. And then we need to join our last mini granny to the first mini granny of the border. So first of all, complete your corner with 3 treble crochets. And then the first joining point will be the first space on the first mini granny of the border. So slip stitch join there. Continue working along the side of your granny square that you're joining. 3 trebles into that space. Another joining point. So slip stitch join. And we're now at the corner. So we're just going to work the first 3 trebles of the corner here. and then we need to do a slip stitch join to the first mini granny that we made. Now the first mini granny that we made, we've actually got a treble here and then 3 more trebles, so we've got the last part of half of the corner and the second half of the corner, and we need to join between the first treble and the second treble, just with a slip stitch as before. So I'm just going to take my hook out. Don't cut your yarn at this point because we still need to work the unworked sides of our mini grannies. So I'll just take my hook out so you can see. So we've joined all our mini granny squares now, and we now need to work the unworked edge of all our mini grannies, and we'll just do that in one continuous round. Now, before I start showing you how to do this last part of the joining process, just a reminder not to be tempted to put extra chains in, because if you put extra chains in on this last part, what will happen is that your mini granny square border might start to ruffle a little bit and won't lay as flat as you would like. So don't be tempted to put in extra chains anywhere. So the first thing we need to do is complete the corner on our first mini granny here. So I'm going to work 3 treble crochets into that corner space, and I'm going to continue working around the edge of the whole square now, just in usual granny square fashion. So 3 trebles into the next space. I'm now at the corner, so I'm just going to do usual granny square corner. So 3 trebles. One chain, 3 trebles. And move along to the next side. Once again, 3 trebles into the next space. And now that brings us to a corner of one of the mini grannies that we joined. So we're going to work, we've got the second half of the corner already made, so we just need to finish it off by working 3 treble crochets into the corner space. And now we need to do a slip stitch over the joining point, which is this bit here. So if you pull those bits apart, you can see there's a little gap. So we're going to work just a normal slip stitch into that gap. So I'm going to just put my hook in from the front to the back and slip stitch through. Remember, don't put any extra chains in at this point. And then we're going to complete the corner for the next mini granny. We've got the first half of the corner there. We need to finish the second half. So that's 3 trebles into that space. So just to show you what we've done over the joining point there. So we've got to the corner of our mini granny and we've worked the 3 trebles needed to complete that corner. And then we've slip stitched in between the join and then completed the corner on the next mini granny, and just continue to work along the side. 3 treble crochets into the next gap, just as you would with a normal granny square. Brings us to another joining point. So once again, work 3 trebles into that corner to complete it. At the join, we're going to slip stitch into that gap, and then once again work your 3 treble crochets to complete the next corner. And we're just going to continue all the way around the square in exactly the same way, slip stitching at your joining points. So I'm going to get that done and I'll see you in a moment. So I'm now coming up to the end of this round and I'm just working the last 3 trebles into this space here along the side. And this is where our round began, and we've got 1 treble made for that first part of that corner, so we just need to make 2 more trebles to complete the 3 treble cluster. And then we can join with a slip stitch into the top of that first stitch. And that is our round completed, and you can cut your yarn. So we've now added all of our mini granny squares around our large granny square, and it's all laying nice and flat. Thank you very much for watching my video. You can find more crochet tutorials on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can keep up to date with what I'm making by following Little Dove Crochet on Facebook and Instagram. Bye for now.